All right, we are live. Juliet, Alex, welcome back for the industry deep dive of, I guess this is officially Q2s, but we're doing it in Q3. Admittedly, we're a little slow and far behind due to our hefty summer schedules that we all enjoy so much. And it's always a pleasure to see you two, and excited for the stuff that we have on tap here. We're going to eat the quarterly reports. We're going to go into some longevity stuff. We're going to go into a lot of really interesting things that are going on. But first and foremost, how have you guys been? Maybe give us some insights into the highlights of your summer, and we'll go from there. So yeah, Juliet, please start us off.
Thanks again, Eric. As I said, when I saw you guys, I truly look forward to talking to you guys every time we get together. So this is the highlight of my week. So thanks again for hosting us. And quick recap, I just got back from being totally off the grid on the Hell's Canyon of the Snake River on the Oregon-Idaho border, technology free, which was very special. And then for the first time ever, even though we've worked with so many athletes, we're going to head to Europe and be able to catch a few days of the Olympics in Paris. So we'll have lots to report on what that experience is like. So that's what's kind of on tap in the Starrett summer.
Yeah, fantastic. And Alice, what have you been up to?
Yeah, so great to see you two again, and look forward to this conversation. It's been a great summer here in the Jackson Hole area in the Teton Mountains, and a lot of year two for my mountain biking experiment. So far, so good. I seem to have my limbs and haven't had any traumatic events, which at my age is kind of critical. And a lot of road biking, and a couple of bear encounters. Nothing too scary, but close enough so that I figured out how to carry bear spray on my bike. And to my family's dismay, I had not been doing that. And yeah, we're heading to the North Woods of Wisconsin to a lake, my wife's lake house, and that'll be a lot more relaxing than Jackson is in the summer.
Wait, so is, we the only real sort of apex predator we have to worry about out here in California is mountain lions. But I mean, this is like a thing. Is everybody on their bikes carrying bear spray where you both are?
Yes.
Amazing.
It's been, yeah, it's been a little scary in Teton Park. There've been some attacks and some pretty, and of course where Eric lives, there are even more grizzlies.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of them. And if people ever visit, or if you guys ever visit Glacier National Park, especially the east side of the park, and you get into some bigger hikes, I would say there's like if you do a couple days, there's probably a 50% chance you'll at least see a grizzly from a distance. Hopefully not too close, but they are beautiful. But I think everyone has a kind of a love-hate relationship with grizzlies. You love them for everything they are, but man, I really don't want to.
No, you do not want to turn a corner and run into one.
Oh, no. So far, so good.
So I'm sorry to keep talking about bears on this, but
Sure.
I love this subject. So real quick question. Are you allowed to bring dogs with you into Glacier? And the only reason I ask is there was an Outside magazine piece that said dogs are actually super helpful with bear interactions. But I was like, I wonder if you can bring them into Glacier or not because it's a national park. No.
Yeah, the only way you can is if they are like a licensed therapy dog. Like you see a lot of veterans with dogs in the park. And I've seen a bunch of, which I'm sure some of them are real therapy dogs, right? But check it over off of Amazon or
Can you
something.
count one as a therapy dog if it's therapy for your fear of grizzly bears, right? Like that would be why I'd want one.
Question, yeah. I'm sure you'll get it with gripped. But yeah, you can't, unfortunately, unless you have a special license for it. But they are great deterrents, and I would highly recommend having a dog. I have an Australian Shepherd that I take with me all the time on the trails, and yeah, she'll let me know there's something going on. That's for sure. On my end, let's see. I was telling you guys, just got back a little while ago from a trip to Uzbekistan for my 10-year anniversary. It was quite unique, exceeded expectations. And I think people, if you're interested in doing something like that and visiting Central Asia and seeing all the ancient Silk Road cities and all that, just DM me. I'll give you a nice agenda because we kind of learned some things the hard way. But it's totally worth it. Istanbul was really cool on our way back. And then also something that may be of interest to you guys, especially usually as I went to the first High Rocks event in New York City, the first outdoor one. And it was quite a spectacle. Very impressed. Over 5,000 spectators, sold out in something like 24 hours. Not spectators, participants, and then even more spectators and all, a lot of big brand partnerships. It reminded me of the early kind of just when CrossFit was maturing, but definitely less technical, more accessible, not as good on the spectator side. I don't think it's not as fun to see people do freakish feats, right? Like you see in CrossFit, but it was definitely, and there's something there. There's a
Yeah,
spark.
it seems to be growing. Was this the one Lance Armstrong competed in too? Did you see Lance? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think his publicist will probably flag this now, but I posted a photo of him on my LinkedIn. So I was like, oh my God, it's like Lance. So that was pretty cool. He did really well, I guess. But the problem was you couldn't see him. You didn't know where anybody was on the track. Like they were making the announcements and stuff like that. So from a spectator standpoint, I think they're going to figure a few things out. But it was definitely, it was impressive. It was really, really
Yeah,
cool.
I want to check it out. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, is New York City a good venue for that kind of event?
Well, it was on the this big Hudson River, right? So it was beautiful. Getting in and around anywhere in New York City is, I guess, a little bit tough, I would say. But I don't think it was an issue. And for them, I mean, everyone who's running along that path, which is probably one of the most run paths in the country, thought like the advertising and the PR around it, I'm sure was spectacular, but couldn't have been cheap to rent that spot. I'll tell you that much.
Well, I bet Alex is too, but I'm a Tour de France junkie. So I sometimes
Yeah.
listen to Lance's podcast, which is how I knew that he had done it. And I think, all in classic Lance way, all he talked about were all of his weaknesses. Which I'm sure he has some, but I was like, I bet he totally flayed. So I'm not surprised to hear he did.
He looks bigger. Like he's definitely gained physical mass, right? That was the first thing about him. I'm like, wow, his neck and the traps and all these things. It doesn't look like the guy we knew on the bike, but man, he was moving weight, pulling rope, moving, running, obviously. So yeah, very cool event. Well, let's get into some quarterly reports. Now these are Q1, right, Alex, that we're going to get into probably very shortly. As soon as you get back from the Olympics, Juliet, we'll probably do Q2 because it'll be out. But let's start with the top of the line, at least in the order we had. But Planet Fitness. So what's your take on those?
Yeah. So last time we talked about Planet, they hadn't found a CEO, and they finally did in April. A woman, Colleen Keating, who comes from the hotel industry, and I think it's great to have a little more diversity in the C-suite of these, leading public companies. I think she has franchise experience or expertise, so I think that's great. Around fitness, probably very little domain expertise, and that's a question mark. She succeeded Chris Rondo, who started at the front desk in Planet Fitness in New Hampshire, and worked his way up to CEO, and had a lot of domain expertise and credibility. So that's always a little, kind of uncertain how these really excellent executives come into the industry from outside. Are they going to do they have the acumen to figure out what works and what doesn't work in fitness? So I think that's a, TBD. But, last time we were talking about them, there was that whole transgender issue in the locker rooms and boycotts. And I think, the stock is doing well. I mean, it's up at 76 now. It was in the 50s when we last talked. So, and that's without any new numbers really, other than the first quarter, which was fine. I think it'll be interesting to hear her on her earnings call and see if she's got a strategy that's different. I think their model may be a little stale. It may need some refreshing. And coming from the hotel industry is interesting because a lot of the hotel brands have a lot of the chains have multiple brands, and they might have a good, better, best sort of strategy, and maybe Planet will add a brand. Who knows? But it's performing. I think it's meeting expectations. It's not growing that quickly, but it's still growing, and so they're in good shape. And I look forward to hearing from her.
Of course, any takeaways on your end, Juliet, from the earnings?
Not really. I mean, I would love to dive more into the CEO conversation, but I know we have another CEO coming down the pipeline. So I say we move on to the next one.
Yeah. One of the things that the quote that I saw in there that caught my eye was something along the lines, as well as national advertising campaign that we believe may not have resonated as broadly as we had anticipated. And I think when you go with some of these brands, which I admire all these types of campaigns, right, that are very targeted towards it. Come to mind, I was just talking to Brandon from Metabolic and Eddie from Tech about this on a separate podcast, but like the Gymshark, right? Like they know exactly who they're going after in their campaigns. And obviously Equinox, right, is very found. It's like you're gonna, if you're doing it right, you're gonna push some people away. Like I was looking at Planet Fitness is some of their stuff, and I'm definitely not who they want in their gym, right? I'm probably gonna grunt, probably gonna drop some weights, and so their campaign is like, to me, I'm like, that's what you want, right? It's like you kind of want. So when I see something like that may actually mean that it's working. Like if it's not broadly accepted, then that probably means by your core audience it is being accepted, and other people are like, yeah, no, and that's kind of the point of it, right? I don't know. I thought that was kind of an interesting, like, yeah, that makes total sense. Of course, it's not broadly accepted because they're not broadly going after a lot of people. I don't know. Just my 2 cents on that one.
Yeah, I think they were trying to extend their appeal with that campaign, and I can't remember who the artist was who was spotlighted in the January campaign. But it felt like the diversity, they were trying to diversify a little bit the appeal and broaden it. But I think the growth has slowed down there, and they're going to have to, freshen it up. They've increased their strength, the component in their spaces, and taken away cardio, and that makes sense, I think. But that's sort of a tweak. I don't know if that's enough to get them, back to really hyper growth. But so, the other CEO, there's 2 other big CEO stories. One was Peloton, where they, just as they were releasing earnings in May, they announced that Barry McCarthy was stepping down, and they announced another huge round of employee cuts and expense cuts. And so, that's sort of the end of the Barry McCarthy chapter. 2 years and some, an executive who came out of Netflix and Spotify with just an incredible record of success in those companies. But did it translate in the connected equipment fitness world? And I think the answer is pretty clear, right? It did it. So is that, it's hard to find a more qualified executive than Barry McCarthy, but that doesn't mean that it translates.
I mean, I find that so interesting, Alex, and I'd love you to dive more in on that whole domain expertise piece because, of all these CEOs, including the Taco Bell CEO, that's what I was left wondering in every case is, does it really matter? Is domain expertise like 4th or 5th on the list of important qualities you'd want in a CEO, especially when you have a struggling company like Peloton? Or does it really matter, right? I mean, I don't know what the answer to that is, but I mean, at least for, as someone in the industry, I, of course, and I think you both agree, like we would love to see someone from within the industry get elevated into one of these roles, but maybe is there really no such person in any of these companies that could be, someone could give them a chance, even if they don't have prior CEO experience. I don't know. I don't know what the calculus is of hiring these CEOs, but clearly the idea of taking a risk with an untested CEO is not part of the calculus.
Yeah, and I want to expand on that before you answer, Alex, on that
Yeah, sure.
question. That I think, talk about CEO coming in. I joke about, well, it's a lot easier to sell gorditos than it is to sell, fitness programs, right? People love gorditos. People don't always love fitness; they like the result. So it's like, well, can stuff like from the outside industry translate into fitness, or are we truly unique, right, in the fact of what we're selling, because it's something that takes motivation, takes willpower, takes things like that in order for the consumer to actually grasp on. So, what do you think, Alex? I mean, can these skills translate? Are we unique? Are we special?
I think we're very special. So yeah, I mean, look around the industry, and I'm sure there are exceptions, but Brahmakrati at Lifetime started the business. He's been in it 30 plus years. He knows the customer. He knows the marketplace. He knows the history. It's pretty hard. It's really hard to find. I can't think of a really successful executive who's come in from outside the industry. You look at Equinox. Harvey Spivak has been in that business for 20 plus years. You think of some of the other, the LA Fitnesses or 24-hour fitness. Mark Mastro built that business, and when he left, it was never the same. And so it's not impossible. And I'm sure there are exceptions that I can't think of, but it does feel like the type of industry, maybe it's like Hollywood, or I'm sure there are lots of examples where you need people like Bob Iger, who just grew up in the business, and when you try to replace him with somebody from outside, it just doesn't translate. So the thing though that is disappointing to me, also disappointing, but primarily disappointing, is that these companies aren't training their successors. So, Peloton, they decide Barry's not the right guy, or he decides he's not the right guy, leaves. They don't have a successor. Like, what is the board doing? The board's major responsibility is CEO, having the right CEO in the corner office. And that means training successors, always having a successor available. And I'm not saying it's easy, but these are big companies. Xponential, we haven't talked about, but Geisler leaves and there's no successor. Now, they did replace him quickly, and so that took them a month. So that's really quick. My suspicion is they were already thinking about who to bring in, because there were so many dark clouds hanging over that CEO role. But yeah, they bring in somebody who's a great executive, hugely successful at Adidas and at Taco Bell, but he's my age. He's mid-60s. Is that I'm not in ages. Like, he could certainly be a really successful executive for many years, but my suspicion is he's in there for short term to find somebody who can run it for the long term. I would expect. But again, why, is he going to have the business acumen? Is he going to understand, how 10 brands in fitness, how they operate, what levers to pull to make them, get back on track if they aren't on track, or how to grow them? I don't know. It's clear he's got franchise experience. He's got sporting goods experience. So that's good, but that's not enough.
One question that I had for you on the CEO thing is, what role, I'm assuming it's an outsized role, do the boards have? And is it because the boards of these companies don't have any domain expertise? And the reason I had this question when you sent around this info about the CEOs is, and this is rumor mill, but I always hear CrossFit rumors, and I always hear that there's this ongoing CrossFit sort of conflict between like the old guard in CrossFit and the new guard, which is trying to run it like a business. And I'm not aware, for example, on CrossFit, that there's a single kind of like affiliate owner, original CrossFit person on the board of CrossFit, right? It's a bunch of investors. And so I don't know, I'm just wondering, like, could part of this issue be solved in choosing CEOs if they actually ever had a domain expert or two on their boards?
Yeah.
And is that something they would ever do?
That's it's a great point. I mean, ultimately it's the board's obligation, responsibility, to make sure the CEO is the right CEO, to make sure there's a successor in line, and then if they need to replace them, to find the right person. The boards are, as you point out, they're typically dominated by investors, and so it could be private equity, it could be venture, and so having been a CEO of a public company that was private equity owned, I could tell you that the number of good ideas around how to run the business, or how to, what strategy for growth was almost zero. So the boards have typically a lot of financial expertise, but not a lot of expertise around how to run a fitness business. That's probably the same thing in a lot of for a lot of businesses. That's not unique, I don't think. But I think the challenge is that it's a relatively small industry. The pool of talent is a little bit shallow. I know we have big companies in the industry, but compared to tech or industrial, packaged goods or consumer type products, we just don't have that reservoir.
Well, we mentioned Lifetime in their report. Is there anything big that stood out to you guys there? And while you're thinking, I want to remember, I brought this. Anthony Paneri posted something the other day about Lifetime's newest location. It has a 10,000 person waiting list. It's 6.5 acres, 186,000 square feet. These things are no joke. So it seems like they're on the right track. But what's your take, given the numbers and the reports?
Well, I love the historic levels of member retention that the CEO pointed out, because I think that has been the biggest Achilles heel in the industry, just the churn and the having to, constantly replenish your membership, other than Peloton, which has that amazing retention rate that is off the charts good. So I thought that was great. I mean, the CEO challenge at Lifetime is sort of the opposite of the others, in that the CEO is also chairman of the board. So I would call it, he's sort of a CEO for life situation, and that at some point, you need some checks and balances on the CEO. And I don't think, I mean, I don't sit in on board meetings. But I kind of doubt there's much checking going on there, or balancing. So, but that being said, you have continuity. If, God forbid, the CEO gets hit by a truck, I bet there's no successor that's obvious to step in there. But that company is poised to. It's going to be really interesting to see their second quarter results, because they've been talking about free cash flow forever, and it's supposed to happen in the second quarter. So if that happens, they will turn to a big corner, I think, and Wall Street will be very, very happy. And I think, the stock already has done really well. They're up like 38% this year. So
Wow.
yeah, so that's really good. Expo's up but they were beat up at the beginning of the year. But I think it's interesting going back to Expo for a second. The street really likes the new CEO. There's no other reason why that stock would be up. There's no new information. Geisler leaves, the stock goes to 7 or 8. It's now at 19. And the only news is Mark King is the new CEO. So, at least those voters are voting, thumbs up for Mark King.
Any takeaways from you, Juliet?
Well, I picked up on exactly what you did, Eric, the new gym and the wait list. And, my big takeaway there is like, yes to gyms. I don't know if anyone had this lingering question post-pandemic that people want to leave their home and go to a gym. And, despite my love of the home gym, I still think people use the gym as a place to commune with others, and that the community piece is maybe as important as the fitness piece. So that's what I really took away from that 10,000 person wait list, as I was like, people are still craving a location to, have community and see their friends and, just have that community piece. So I definitely sort of did a little like fist bump when I saw that, because I think that's great for the industry writ large and a good sign for all of us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if I'm aging into this now, but like the thought of like a country club experience, which is what I watched the promotional video. I'm like, it very much is a country club, right? It's got exercise, tennis, all that stuff. I'm like, that's starting to sound pretty nice at age 47. I'm like, just a place I can hang out after work, or like, going on a Saturday afternoon. So
Yeah. Oh my
maybe
God.
that's making a comeback.
We're on the same tip, Eric, because I have a dear friend who I like to make fun of, who is obsessed with the Bay Club in the Bay Area, which is like
Oh,
a
yeah, very
fancy,
nice.
it's a country club. It's like he loves the Bay Club, and I kind of love to make fun of him because I come from like the gritty CrossFit gym world. But he's taken me as a guest a few times to the Bay Club, and I was like, oh yeah, like I'm definitely joining the Bay Club at some point. I don't even know if I'm going to work out there. I'm just going to like, have a coffee and meet up with my friends and play pickleball. Like I'm so into
read the
it
Wall
too.
Street Journal, which I
Yeah,
never do.
so
Right?
I'm right on your tip with the country club thing, Eric.
Yeah. The Olympic Club too in San
Yes.
Francisco.
Oh my God. Yes. Yes.
Anyway, yeah. So yeah, the thing that, and for this one I want to ask you about, Alex, is like its center operations expenses increased 17.4%. What was the particular reason behind that? It sounds like there's a lot of confidence that's going to drop and increase cash flow. Is that kind of the situation there?
Yeah, I think they're all about taking care of the members, and the payrolls are huge, and wages are going up, right? But that company is not compromising on payroll. And I think that's the main driver, but there could be some other things in there as well. And that, if that translates into higher retention, it's a great investment. So I think the members there are super happy. I don't, as you will be when you join.
Yeah, I don't think one's coming here anytime soon. But okay, Xponential. Yeah, Xponential. Any additional thoughts on that one? New CEO. You mentioned a lot of the highlights is like, okay, stock's up, but we'll see what happens, right? We got to let this one play out for a little bit, let it marinate.
Yeah, they divested another brand, right? The running brand.
Stride.
Yeah. So they divested that one. Row House. They added Lindora, which is, I guess, a longevity brand. And so that's, 2 brands divested this year. That's a lot more. It's more than, they've done ever in the past. But, it's an interesting portfolio, right? It's a portfolio. And like your stock portfolio, you buy, you sell, depending on how things are doing. And that's what makes it, I think, a robust model. If bar is doing really well, then that's going to drive the growth and stretch, and and they're not going to bat 1,000, right? They're going to buy some stuff that is not going to pan out. But it's smart to cut your losses and focus on the winners. So I think that's good. That's it's a tribute to Geisler and his partner, Mark Grabowski, who started the company. They were the first really to put together a portfolio like that.
J-Star, any thoughts on Expo?
Anything besides that to add?
Yeah, me neither. Yeah. So we'll touch on Peloton one more time because I thought it was interesting. Like J-Star, you and I talked about this was, I think Alex, you recognize this too. I kind of like the direction, like they've turned quite a bit, right? But some of the stuff, they're reinvesting in their product line, the content, B2B partnerships like with Hyatt. I think it was 800 locations, and just what they seems to be their kind of more of their core competencies and doubling down on that. Am I reading that correctly, or what do you guys think?
That's exactly what I saw. When I saw the hotel thing, I was like, yes, Peloton, like they should be having that partnership with every hotel chain. That's the perfect use case for a Peloton, especially if you can also access the programming, even if you're not a member of Peloton prior to going to the hotel. Because I'm not a Peloton member, for example, and I'm not really that excited about Pelotoning, but I would use a Peloton if I also had access to programming in a hotel-like environment. And yeah, I also was taken, I do feel like every time I read the report, it's like the, company of the constant pivot. That's the theme I read every time. But this time I felt like the pivots made a lot of sense to me. And we've talked about this in the past. Their programming and their app are just their like gold star. And, that's where they just have to keep focusing their attention, to my mind. And it seems like in this latest report, that's the direction they're going. So I for the first time reading this Peloton report I was like, okay, have some hope here.
Yeah. Yeah.
It made sense to me.
It's a bit of a ghost ship though, right? You have no CEO. So, the new CEO might come in and decide, to. Yeah. So I think we need to wait and see who gets the job and what their strategy is. I wouldn't expect great results from the primary initiatives that they're focused on now. I think those might help. They might stabilize the ship a little bit, but they have some pretty big growth challenges. They can come up with some good stuff, but does it move the needle? Like, does a hotel, how many bikes are they going to sell into the hotels? Is it a big enough number? So that's the challenge. It's a big operation with millions of members, and to get from 3-4 million to 10 million over time is going to require some real magic.
So what I'm hearing is don't smash that buy button yet. All right, Alex.
I don't think anybody is. The stock is kind of hanging around $4, and they managed to refinance a lot of debt. So their balance sheet is stronger than it was last time we spoke, and I think that removes an existential threat. If people are talking about bankruptcy, I don't think that's an issue right now. But let's wait and see who gets the job and what their strategy is.
I wonder if this large uptick we're seeing in Lifetime and the interest in people joining actual gyms will make it difficult for them to keep growing their Gold Star program, right? I mean, do they have as many people as they have and are ever going to have because everybody else is ready to go back to Lifetime or, be around other humans? I mean, I wonder if that trend we're seeing on these other businesses is going to negatively impact Peloton's growth, at least on their app.
Yep, I agree with that.
Okay. Well, I think those are the big four. Shall we move on to the trend that's on everyone's tip of their tongue, which is longevity? It seems to be everywhere nowadays. Everybody's getting in on it. I mean, we've talked about it on this quarterly report at least twice and previously, right? So what's new? I mean, you gave us some really good homework here, Alex. You gave us the Ground Truth podcast. Exercise may be the single most potent medical intervention ever known. By a show of hands, who's surprised by that? Nobody, right? So that's like, I mean, my take on, I have a couple of things that I've been reading about, but you also sent Alex some information about the Optimized by Equinox, $40,000 a year. And I'm curious, for 40 grand, and presume that's on top of membership. I don't know, or maybe whatever, even if it's just $40,000 a year, we're talking about a pretty healthy chunk of change. So is longevity ever going to be for the masses? Is it worth $40,000 a year? How do you even know if it's worth $40,000 a year? So what are you guys' takes on that program? Yeah, big takeaways.
Juliet,
well, I can take a crack at this. I mean, you guys know that I'm obsessed with the basics. And I have come to think a lot of these programs like Equinoxes actually are just more about a status symbol than they are about actual longevity. I think, if you're in certain circles and you're a member of Equinox's program or a variety of other longevity programs, it is a sort of status symbol. Because what I see that folks are doing within those programs really are just maybe a little more hands-on basics. But, I see the big longevity influencers and, everybody on the internet, what they're suggesting people do for longevity is exercise, which is not new news. Eat fruits and vegetables, sleep, go outside sometimes, make sure you have some loving relationships. So nobody's, the things that everyone's doubling down on from an influencer's perspective don't seem to be this really innovative stuff that we're hoping to learn from, like the Brian Johnsons of the world. And I think it's the same kind of programming that people are getting among, these big, expensive longevity programs. I get it. It is a little, there is some comprehensive blood work involved. There might be some DEXA scan, and maybe from a testing perspective, people might be armed with better data. They've got a VO2 max test and DEXA scans and some comprehensive blood work. But again, it all is, what do you do with that data? And usually what you do with that data is exercise, eat some vegetables and proteins, sleep, have healthy relationships, right? So I don't know. I'm a bit of a skeptic that it's, anything other than a status symbol. What do you guys think? I don't know.
I think Equinox knows its market, and there are a lot of people who are going to say, yeah, I need structure. I need 3 days a week with a personal trainer. I need to talk to a sleep expert. I need to talk to a nutritionist. I need the pampering and do they need it for the rest of their lives? Do they need it for 6 months? I gotta believe, once they get the habits right, they're not going to keep paying $40,000 a year. But the number of reactions I got from friends and colleagues about the price point was even people who can easily afford it were like, yeah, I would never spend that much money. So I guess they're not Equinox people, but yeah, I mean, if you want to be a patient of Peter Attia's, think it's 150, 200, 250,000 a year. And it's so inaccessible that it doesn't mean longevity practices are inaccessible. It just means if you want that level, then, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. And I think that's discouraging to a lot of folks. And it doesn't, I don't think it moves, it helps the cause, because it's just discouraging. Like, okay, well, I can't afford that, so I'm just going to go to Taco Bell and do.
I mean, I love that. I love that point, Alex, because I think, if anything in our industry, we still are small, and even just our regular standard issue gyms and fitness environment isn't still that welcoming to a lot of people. And we still struggle with sort of, staying in our own little silo, so to speak, and not realizing all the ways in which a lot of people don't relate to fitness the way we've created it for them. And I think this does compound that problem, because you couldn't have said it better. I mean, longevity practices really are, the most basic and most effective longevity practices are mostly free. So they are accessible, but I do worry because the media attention and the sort of impact on the internet of big influencers who are, pushing a, 0.01% of people into these programs, I think really makes a lot of people feel like they're just missing out.
Yeah. Well, here's what I like, right? I like that we're repositioning exercise, what used to be exercise for a goal, whether it be fat loss or a better Fran time in CrossFit or whatever it may be, a very specific goal. Now it's like exercise or, health for life, which is a completely different goal. And the thing that I'm noticing is, what are the biomarkers of longevity? That seems to be like a discussion point right now. Like, well, what are we tracking? How do we know, right? And I was listening to a podcast, Peter Attia's The Drive with Joel Jameson, who, the HRV expert in the field. And it was really interesting. They're kind of going back and forth, like, well, VO2 max isn't accessible to everybody. Like, how do you get that? But HRV is more accessible, and resting heart rate is actually a good indicator. And all these things. I actually talked to Joel about this after. But then Joel had an excellent point. He's like, I think it's less about these actual biomarkers, but the lifestyle that goes around trying to attain them. That's what gives you longevity, right? It's all the activity and the things that you do in order to get there. So it's not like those are indicators. But I think that's what people are starting to get hung up on, is like, well, okay, I got to go to this test, right? I got to do all these things. I got to track more. And I'm just as guilty as anybody else because I love data. But that seems to be, to me, like a major observation that I'm seeing, is people want to pay for the numbers, right? And the insights in the reports. Now, there's some really cool stuff going on, of course. I mean, there's like Humanaut Health, which is Jim Donnelly, is the guy from Restore Hyper Wellness.
Yeah, those guys are great. They're actually trying to make it, they're at least trying to make it more accessible. And I really give them, we've had a lot of conversations with them, and I give them huge kudos for trying to say, okay, like we may need to start with the 1%ers, but we're really going to try to open this up, which is seriously admirable. I'm a fan of those guys.
Yeah. Yeah. The way he put it to me was really funny. He's like, we're, I don't know if you want me to say this, I can say it. He's like, we're saving rich people money at this point. But, what we're hoping to get to is, a point where it's really, and I'm going to try some stem cells in my knees, see how that works. So there's like a lot of like scientific stuff that's coming around that's still a little fringy, which I think could be interesting in the longevity space. But for right now, it's like, well, what's all the stuff you mentioned, and then creatine. That's all we know for sure. Right.
Right. We know for sure creatine is great. You know what that reminds me of a little bit, though, when you were saying that, is remember when all those studies came out about, kids who listen to classical music like are better in life. And it turned out that it had really nothing to do with the classical music. It had to do with like all these other things that were going on in a household in which parents would listen to classical music. I feel like it's almost the same thing when we're talking about all this health data. The same people who are going to be curious about getting their biomarkers in a variety of ways are also going to be the same people who are going to do something about it once they have it, right? So it's like, is it good? I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, to have a great VO2 max, what do you have to do? Exercise a ton, sleep well, right? Eat well. So it's like, well, it all lines up. Things we've been
Yeah.
talking about for many, many years. One that was interesting, and I don't know if you guys had a chance to check it out, but Proteus Motion, I know you know them well, Alex. And
Yep.
they released a state of power, and how I think this is really encouraging for people in the strength game is how power could be one of the bigger biomarkers that we're missing in general, especially rotational power. I mean, I'll just read a couple of statistics. Overall power decreases at an average rate of 10.2% per decade. Men decrease at an average of 9.2, women an average of 11.2. So women lose power quickly. Women have a lower rate of power loss until their 60s and 70s, and it seems to be more precipitous of a fall off. After 70s, women begin to have a greater rate of decrease in power compared to men. And by their 70s, men have lost almost 39% of their power. Women have lost 53% of their power. Power can be trained, right? It can be trained fairly easily. But and I recently interviewed Eric Cressy about this too, because he's deep in that world. And he was like, yeah, rotational power specifically, because you think about falling, what happens, as you get old, you fall, you break your hip or a shoulder or something like that. And that's kind of like the start of the end, the start of the end, right? And, think about all the things that go into it. If you have rotational power, you can fight ground forces, you can catch yourself, you're more balanced. So I thought that was really interesting in their positioning as powerpenia and how you lose that over time. So I think that's something that's going to be kind of intriguing for our industry to watch as more data, because we didn't have that data available before Proteus.
Yeah, but how do you mainstream it? How do you, how many Proteus machines are out there? How expensive are they? I know they're getting traction, and I know that the benefits of what they're doing are pretty amazing. And I've actually used it, and it directionally, it's been really helpful. And, there are some concepts I've seen where people are integrating the Proteus into assessment tools in a way that could reach a lot of people. So, I think that's really helpful. And I don't want to be too simplistic about sort of the prescription for how to get people on the longevity train, because I do think there's a place for technology. I do think there's a place for these assessment tools, for programs, for measurement, for biomarkers. It's just a matter of sort of product market fit. Like, how do you we kind of have this bifurcated situation where you have Planet Fitness on the one hand with 20 million members, and their motto for years was, or at least what the CEO would say is, look, we're just in the business of getting people off the couch. Right?
Yeah.
And,
right.
and that's the biggest impact we can have on people's lives. Get them off the couch. And then there's Peter Attia and Equinox, and offering these incredibly intensive 100 different blood tests and colonoscopies every 6 months. But in the middle there's a huge number of people who want more than what Planet Fitness is doing, but not what Peter Attia is prescribing. It's just inaccessible in so many ways, time, money. So yeah, so how does the industry address that white space in the middle there? I think that's going to be really fascinating. And
only, Alex, if there was someone on this call who literally wrote a book on simplifying longevity.
Yeah, simplifying health habits. Well, I had this same feeling. I read the full Proteus report, and what I did love about it was actionable. And obviously you can use Proteus's technology, but also a good strength and conditioning program done by a good strength and conditioning coach should be able to train power as well. And that is accessible to everybody, right? And it's one of the things, I know there continues to be this upward trend, as we read in the reports, about people interested in strength training as an example. And I think the power piece is, I thought, so important, because don't know if you guys feel this in your own community, but I do feel like more and more people in my age range are getting the message that they should strength train, but the how is not working yet. People still don't know what to do. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how often. They don't know what qualifies as good strength and conditioning. So even though we have all these options available to people, somehow it's not hitting for like my population subset. A lot of them have like a couple dumbbells at home and they're trying to move those around a little bit, but there's no real thinking or thought or progression or anything about speed or power or agility or right there's missing these key elements of what a good strength and conditioning program would look like for people. So to me, I see that as a huge opportunity because that can be accessible to a lot of people, just really good strength and conditioning. Because I do think and even a good, better, best model, like obviously moving some dumbbells around is better than being on the couch and better than nothing. Maybe that's good. But best is like a great strength and conditioning program that you follow consistently. But we haven't figured out how to tell people what that is. It's a free for all out there. They know they should strength train and they're still going to the gym doing a bunch of stupid stuff without a program and a plan, or they're doing it at home. So I think that's one big obvious space that we can fill. And I think some gyms are doing that and personal trainers are doing that. But man, I think that market is huge. And I don't know how we can get that message out there other than talking about it and directing people.
Yeah. Did you guys notice in that podcast? I don't know if you listened to the whole thing, but the Stanford doctor, who's I think a cardiologist, mentioned a stat where he said 1 minute of exercise buys you 5 minutes of extra life.
Yes.
And high intensity exercise buys you 7 or 8 minutes of extra life. Now, I had never heard that before.
Me either. It was amazing.
I didn't dig into the data, but I figure it's a good source. So, but of course, what is exercise, right? Does it matter if it's strength or if it's cardio? Does it need to be both? But it's such a simple, strong message that it just resonated with me. And I was like, oh, if that could motivate people, we need simple messages. Like when we get bogged down in stuff that's too sciencey, we lose a lot of people. So, I mean, that's obvious, but so it's all about motivating. We kind of know what medicine people need to take in terms of exercise, and that's our business. And it's how to crack the code on motivation. How do you motivate people to have a consistent, practice?
I think we should have an app. I think we should have that
there's got to be a technology.
Every minute of exercise, and at the end of the month, it gives you a report and says, "Congratulations, you added 20 minutes to your life," or 17 hours. And by the end of the year, you're like, "Oh, I added 12, 2 months to my life due to exercise." That would be
Apple is going to do it now.
Yeah. Apple is listening. I mean, but that would be really motivating though. I agree. I mean, you get like a party, you get like an explosion of confetti on your app and you're like, you just extended your life by 27 hours and 67 seconds or whatever. I mean, I love it.
Yeah. Let's do it.
With our solar panels, we have the number of trees that we effectively planted, and it's a little analogy, but motivational. Yeah. So I love all this conversation around, that Tia does and the work that sort of the extremists are doing, Brian Johnson. But at the end of the day, that has to trickle through the population, or it's just preaching to the
it's just like, it's entertainment, right? In many ways it's entertainment, right? And that's fun, and I like entertainment. I for my part, it's like I'm the let's keep it simple person, but I love technology, and I love to get my biomarkers checked, and I love playing with all the tools and bells and whistles and devices, So I think there's a place for it. And I do think that we were so inspired by Jim and the Humanot team I think there are some people who are really like, okay, this is cool and all, but how do we get this out to the masses? And hopefully that will hopefully there'll be many Humanot type companies who really take that on as their mission.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think we're just about up on time, you guys. It always goes fast with you too. But any closing thoughts? Anything that comes to mind before we shut her down until the next one?
I mean, I would like to see some successful sales of fitness businesses before the end of the year. Like, I'd like to see Barry's sell for a huge amount of money, or, who else I'd like to see some IPOs maybe. I think we need some, some exits where people look at the industry and say, all right, this was a really successful investment, and the investors, exited and made a lot of money, and now they want to come back in and invest in other things. It feels like it's been a while, and it's not just the fitness industry. It's
right.
The tech industry too, but tech always has something like, AI and NVIDIA, and people are like, oh, I can, focus on that and make tech investments. So I think I'd like to see, I'm hopeful that'll happen before the end.
Awesome.
Well, for my part, based on our CEO conversation, I'd love to see some of these companies put a couple domain experts on their boards, right? I think that it would be cool if all those companies had someone who you wouldn't expect to be sitting on their board, but is a domain expert on their board. I think that would be a cool development, and it would be good to see.
Are you throwing your hat in the ring?
Yeah, I mean,
I'll throw your hat in the ring, Juliet.
And Eric too. Eric would be great. And I could think of a list of 10 other amazing people. But yeah, I think, someone or 10 of someone's ending up on some of these boards with some domain expertise would be a really cool thing to see.
Yeah.
Have you ever, well, we could talk offline.
Yeah, I think for mine, and just because, we talk about simplification and longevity and, the confusion of the consumer with all these things. But, Cressy said something the other day. I don't know if I'm stealing his quote or if I'm just kind of pulling from his thoughts, but basically his thought was like, listen, just be as athletic as you can for as long as you can. That's the best option for longevity. I'm like, that's it. You nailed it.
Yes, Eric, right? Cressy. Yes.
So awesome.
Don't the Starrett say, don't do nothing?
Yep. Never do nothing.
Pretty good.
Never do nothing. Never do nothing.
I love that.
We're just full of bumper stickers today. You guys, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. Have a great time in Paris, Juliet, and we'll record when you get back.
Sounds great. Thanks again, Eric, for hosting.
Yeah, thanks.